Well, isn't it wonderful to know that we have Jesus with us in these last days? He promises to perfect that which concerns us, and he promises to go in front of us and prepare the way for us, as he tells his sheep in John 10. We're going to have another look at the spine of last day scripture in Matthew 24, and we're going to compare it to the scroll of Revelation. First of all, we're going to look at the Matthew 24. We see that Jesus answers questions about the signs of the times and the signs of his coming from Matthew 24:4 to 31. The signs of the times of the gospel preached in all the world, great deceit in the church and the world, wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilences and earthquakes, and the persecution of the church and martyrdom. In Matthew 24:15, we see the setting up of the abomination of desolation that leads to this time of great tribulation. Talipsis, which means constriction. And it's only immediately after this time of tribulation that is cut short as limited by God that in Matthew 24:29 we see the darkening of the heavens, and then the return of Christ in Matthew 24:30 and the rapture of the church in Matthew 24:31. It's a beautiful, simple, straightforward narrative. Let's look at Revelation. So Revelation was a scroll that has writing on both sides, but we can't read the writing until each one of the 7 seals have been opened. And we're going to see that these 7 seals are like the table of contents before you start a book, or like the opening credits of a movie, introducing us to the leading characters and events of the last days before we actually get into the bulk of the scripture. And Jesus opens the scroll in Revelation 6, and the first rider that comes out is sitting on a white horse, and he has a bow and a crown. I love the bow because the bow signifies doctrine. And the gospel and Jesus have been conquering the world for the last 2,000 years, not by the sword, but through the beautiful doctrine of the gospel. He goes forth conquering and to conquer, and that's the same Greek word as the word overcoming. It's just so beautiful. The church has continued to conquer and overcome through the blood of the Lamb and through the doctrine of the gospel for the last 2,000 years. Jesus is the rider on the white horse. And of course, in Matthew 24, we see the link that this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and only then shall the end come. So this white horse rides all the way to Jesus' return. The next seal is opened and we see a red horse. This horse represents war. He's got a big sword in his hand. He takes peace from the earth. This has been riding throughout the last 2,000 years, but with increasive destructiveness and influence. We've seen the First and Second World War killing millions of people all over the world, and even just the Middle East wars since 9/11 have cost about over 4 million lives. And of course, we see the synchronicity with Matthew 24, that Jesus also warns us of wars and rumors of wars, nation and shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So beautiful synchronicity. The third seal is opened and we see a black horse with a man holding a pair of scales. This represents sort of commerce and business and food, the selling of food. And it's clear from this that the necessities of life are expensive, but the luxuries are protected. Both under capitalism and under communism, the poor have suffered greatly through the crashes of capitalism and the famines and just destructiveness of the communist system. And of course, Jesus does mention the famines in Matthew 24. We've seen recently how these 2 horsemen, the red horse and the black horse, have been riding together. The military-industrial complex, great money to be made in the business of war. Jesus opens the 4th seal and out comes the pale rider of death. He naturally follows those last 2. Power was given to him to kill with the sword and with hunger. Just devastating for so many people around the world today. Well, that's the end of the 4 horsemen. The 5th seal is opened, and we don't see a horseman, but we see the saints, the martyred saints under the altar of God, crying out, Lord, how long will it be till you avenge us? Of course, the saints have been suffering martyrdom for the last 2,000 years all over the world, and perhaps increasing now. Just because of the great expanse of Christians across the world. And this is something that Jesus tells us in Matthew 24. There's going to be a great increase in persecution and martyrdom. So these are the leading characteristics of the last days coming up to Jesus' return and match up so beautifully with Matthew 24. When Jesus opens the sixth seal, we have this event. The sun becomes black, the moon becomes as blood, and the stars fall from heaven. We recognize that from Matthew 24:29. It's meant to be on there, I believe. Immediately after the tribulation shall the sun be darkened, the moon become as blood, and the stars shall fall from heaven. This indicates that the sixth seal is the same event as we read in Matthew 24:29 to 31. The day of the Lord is described in the Old Testament as always being heralded by this great darkening of the heavens. In the books of Joel, book of Amos, and the book of Isaiah. What happens then in the sixth seal we learn that the kings of the earth hide themselves in the rocks and the mountains from the face of him who sits on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. It's the great day of his wrath is here. We read about that wrath in Revelations 15 and 16, the 7 vials or bowls of wrath that are poured out on the Antichrist and his kingdom. You can read about it there. It's very explicit that it's for the Antichrist and his kingdom and those that have received the mark. And in Matthew 24, it says all the tribes of the earth are going to mourn because they're going to see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and glory. Apparently, they haven't been mourning before. In Matthew 24, it says people are going to be eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage before his return. And it's not knowing that the Son of Man is coming back. But this great event changes it. And then it culminates with the rapture as he sends his angels with the great sound of a trumpet to gather together his elect from one end of heaven to the other. You can just imagine from each town, each city, saints are going to be rising up in the sky, and you're going to see them wherever you look, I am sure. So isn't that beautiful? Just a perfect match up there of the events described in Matthew 24 with the first 6 seals of Revelation, describing the major characteristics and that final great event of Jesus' coming. However, that is not the end of the seals. There is a 7th seal still to be opened. In Revelation 7, before the 7th seal is opened, we read of the sealing of the 144,000, and we also read of the saints being in heaven, having come out of great tribulation. Then, at the beginning of Revelation 8, the trumpet judgments of God are released. We don't read about any judgments of God in Matthew 24, or in the book of Daniel, or in any other passage of Scripture describing the events leading up to Jesus' return. So therefore we understand that these events do not happen before Jesus comes back, but as the timeline indicates, they happen afterwards in the following period, because the return of Jesus is not the end of the story. There's a 1,000-year reign of Christ. Satan is released at the end of this period in Revelations 20:7-9. He leads this great final rebellion against God. Yes, there's another drama at the end of the millennium. Only then do we have the judgment of all the unsaved dead in Revelations 20:11-15, and the final conclusion, the wonderful new heaven, new earth, when God himself dwells with men and we have the fullness of the kingdom of heaven on the earth. So this is an error that has been made, which is to put the events of the 7th seal, to put it before Jesus' return. I hope you can see how much more natural it is to allow them to be in the order God has put in them and allow them to take place later on. You see, the church will be in heaven at that time. And that makes it perfectly sensible why God should seal 144,000 from Israel, the saints already being in heaven for these terrible last trumpet judgments. I like to look at it like a tent. The first tent is Jesus' return, and Matthew 24 and Daniel only go as far as that. That's the limit of the tent. But Revelation is like a fly sheet of the tent that carries on through the millennial age, and we have to stretch that out and allow the 7th seal and the events of the 7th seal not to be in our age, but to be in the millennial age. Well, I hope you can see how lining up Matthew 24 and the scrolls of Revelation help us get a sensible timeline for end-time events. God bless you. I believe it makes it all quite simple and straightforward. But the pre-trib rapture folks, they love to put the trumps of God back in the tribulation period. They say this is a time of great judgment on the earth from God, the tribulation. But there's no evidence for that in Matthew 24, and the evidence leads us to believe that all these things happen in the next period at the end of the millennium. Well, I hope that's been a blessing for you. I hope you can see the wisdom in lining up the book of Revelation against Matthew 24 and all the nice synchronicity we see between those two passages. God bless you. Sorry this has been a long one. The next one will be much shorter. Bless you.